Okay, guys, thank you. This is Mr. Fergal O'Brien, guys, Assistant Dean down in UL. So as I said to you earlier, it was difficult this year to get as many guest speakers as I would usually get in. So with things all wrapping up so quick, that's obviously due to COVID and so on, but with things wrapping up so quick, I was conscious of getting in two speakers. And after hearing Sean, I think that talk was really, really good. It was based around the whole thing of well-being. But one thing I want to really get across to you today, guys, as well, is make sure we fill the CAO out properly, and take time to look at that. Nothing wrong with having high expectations, was to be able to cope if they're not met. That's the key thing. So you give it your best shot to leave cert, but make sure you fill the CAO out. So in case, you have a plan B and plan C. Fergal's going to talk about UL, but what I like about Fergal is that he actually talks about business, full stop. And, I remember even in secondary school, I didn't do business myself. I learned more off this guy in 1 hour, than I'd say some people that learn and I don't know what, so thanks very much, Fergal, for coming in. And give a little bit of round of applause there, guys. Thank you.
Look, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about business, but I'll also talk about that CEO decision. Obviously, I'm here to sell you well, right? But that's only part of why I'm here. I can kind of give you some examples of how you might consider your CEO options a bit better or whatever. Jesus, normally I'm in front of 500 and 600 people every day in my job, but this is my first time talking to real people in about a year, so I'm slightly nervous, believe it or not. But anyway, let me first of all talk about UL before I talk about business as a discipline, right? You'll notice, and I'm sure you probably notice when you're thinking about your CEO now, all of the universities and the third level institutions are kind of saying the same thing. They'll all tell you, we've got great facilities, you'll get a job after being with us, and you've got international opportunities. Yeah, now we'll say that as well. So at UL, we have probably the most beautiful campus in Ireland. I'd let you judge that for yourselves if you get the opportunity to actually go in the gates there. It's an incredible facility there altogether. I mean, it's 3 miles outside the city. It's very like an American campus that you'd see on television. Wide open spaces, all the buildings are fit for purpose. They were literally built for what they were designed to do. Whereas in other universities who've had to create space, etc., and move around the cities or whatever, they can tend to cram you into facilities that aren't exactly suitable. We were the first and we are the best, and we can say this with confidence with respect to employability. The reason being is that every single program in UL, whether it be business or otherwise, science, teaching, whatever, you get work experience. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. So in the business course, for example, you get 9 months work experience in third year of our course. Our courses are all 4 years long, but you will get work experience. You will have the opportunity for paid work experience in UL on every single program, bar one, I think, which is something like architecture. It's a bit weird, right? But every other one, 9 months work experience, and we organize that for you. And then you can choose to do it locally, nationally, or internationally. And we do our best to match our jobs with your preferences. So I know loads of students that have gone to Japan, gone to Europe, gone to the States, etc., South America on their work experience. And in fact, sometimes we force you to go there, and I'll talk about that in a second. So that means when you leave UL, whether it be business or otherwise, you have your degree, which is your academic qualification, and you have your 9 months work experience, which makes you really, really employable because you have your academic qualification and your experience, and employers love UL graduates. International, not only do we encourage you to go abroad, but sometimes we force you to do that. There's one of our business degrees where you have to go abroad for the full year in third year. We'll talk about that in a second. But internationalization and an international experience doesn't have to happen abroad. So in UL, you'll be surrounded by students from all over the world. We have loads of incoming students every year that either choose to do a term with us or a full year with us, or actually study their entire degree with us. So we'll have students from all over the world. So you'll have an international experience on campus by dealing with people from different countries, different cultures, learning how people think differently depending on their backgrounds, etc. And that's a very, very positive thing. And like I said, we will actually give you opportunities to go abroad or force you. So there are the 3 things that I would say would be a highlight in terms of UL. Now then there's the business school, right? So I'm a lecturer in finance in the business school. I actually did the business degree at UL and ultimately ended up working there. Now let me just go back to Carol's talk there about kind of CEO making a decision, etc. So let's just take me as an example for randomness in terms of a journey. First of all, what did I study in school? Physics, applied maths, chemistry. Right? 16 doing the leaving. There was only one thing on my mind when I was 16, that was to play football with Kerry, right? That's all I wanted to do. And on the back of that dream, I chose to go to the IT. It was actually an RTC back then, but the IT in Tralee. And I did 2 years business there. Why did I choose business? I knew it was broad and I knew it would give me a bit of space to figure out what I wanted to do. I then went on and did 2 years in UL, got my degree. So there I am, coming out of UL, degree in business studies. I like the idea of teaching. So I said I'd stay in UL and do a 2-year research master's thing, right? It took me 4 years to do that. Why? Because I wasn't exactly focused on it, right? I was messing around with X, Y, and Z. I was doing quite a bit of teaching actually as part of it. So I had plenty of money, the whole shebang. It took me 4 years to do it. Then I went for an interview down in UCC and they actually gave me a lecturing job. So I used that, came back up to Limerick, didn't accept the job down in UCC, came back up to Limerick and said, listen lads, UCC want me, do you want to keep me? And they said, look, we'll give you a short-term contract, we'll look after you in the future. Then I registered for a PhD in Lancaster University in the UK, got that, and now I'm a senior lecturer, assistant dean, whatever, at the University of Limerick. Did I plan any of that when I was your age? Absolutely not. So how did I end up where I am? One, I did actually work hard despite a few distractions, right? And two, I got lucky. The right jobs just opened up at the right time for me. So the other thing that was on my CO, by the way, was PE, physical education at UL. And I think back then there was more than 2 offers that you could generate at the time. And I didn't take that. And my father, who's a secondary school teacher, actually advised me against taking PE because there'd be no jobs in it. 4 years after he said that to me, which would have been the time I was graduating, there was the biggest recruitment drive ever for PE teachers in Ireland. So do you see the decision that I made, right? One was a kind of decision around sport or whatever and finding my feet. I turned down another thing based on my father's advice, which subsequently proved wrong. You know, so you can be trying to predict where the jobs are or predict where the careers will be, but ultimately you should try to do something you like or something that will give you the flexibility to kind of find out what you want to do. So there is no right decision on the CEO, as far as I'm concerned. Now that's easy for me because you kind of have to write something down in due course. But there's no really correct decision. You might look back and say, oh, I picked the wrong thing for the CEO. Big deal, you can go and do something else. And by the way, LinkedIn, you're all familiar with LinkedIn? LinkedIn are now saying that employers are moving away from academic qualifications. And they're looking at maybe starting to train employees themselves for the skills and competencies that they require. But that doesn't mean you can say, no, I won't go to university. Because university is as much about what you learn about life as it is about what you learn about the discipline that you choose to study. Now, certain exceptions to that. If you're doing medicine, etc., open heart surgery, you can't just rock up and do that because you've got steady hands or whatever. You need to have the qualifications, right? So, you know, but generally people aren't that concerned anymore with your academic qualifications, particularly when you're 5 years into a career. Like you go for your first job, they want to know what you studied, right? Then after that, it's really about your experience and what you're good at, as opposed to the academic qualification, obviously with the exceptions that I said. In terms of the business school at UL, there are 3 business degrees. Bachelor of Business Studies. Have you all heard of Commerce in UCD? We do Bachelor of Business Studies. That's what we call our business degree. They're both business degrees. One is a BCom, ours is a BBS, Bachelor of Business Studies. Exactly the same in terms of them being a business degree. We have a BA in International Business. And the third one I always mention is Law and Accounting because they're a nice marriage of skills and it's quite popular in most employers. Bachelor of Business Studies, just like all the BComs or equivalents, come in first year, do a little bit of everything. Do some finance, do some accounting, do marketing, management, HR, economics, communications, which is important in business, and some maths and stats, but nothing very, very difficult, right? Then in second year, you get to choose what you liked in first year as what we call your major or your specialism. And we have five specialisms: accounting and finance, which is the one I did, economics and finance, human resource management, risk management and insurance, and marketing. All right, so you choose one of those as your specialism. You can choose to do language if you want. If you don't choose to do language, you pick what we call a minor option. So I have a Bachelor of Business Studies from UL. I majored in accounting and finance, and I minored in financial services. You might major in human resource management and do Japanese. The languages, by the way, are French, German, Japanese, and Spanish. French and German, you have to be good at them in school. Japanese and Spanish, you start them from scratch. Or you could do risk management insurance with law, or economics with information systems. So you see the way you can kind of build a degree according to your preferences. So that's what I like about business degrees just generally, whether it be a BCom or a BBS or wherever you choose to study business, you get a little bit more time to figure out what you like. We'd have a lot of people that enter into our business degree say, I'm going to be an accountant in the first year, right? And then they discover marketing or they discover HR, and then they want to specialize in that. So they get the choice and the chance to kind of figure out, a year older, a year more material to kind of consider, and kind of a year figuring out what you want to do. So great flexibility in that. Like I said, in that program, you get your 9 months work experience in third year, locally, nationally, or internationally, and we facilitate that and we do everything that's required on that. Now, if you get a job up in wherever, up in Dublin, or if you have to go to Galway for your job, obviously you arrange all your accommodation yourself and everything. We get you the job, and then you're just treated like another member of the workforce. Like, it's not making tea and photocopying by any means. The work experience is proper work experience with responsibilities. BA in international business is slightly different. The BA in international business is like an a la carte menu in a restaurant. You look at a big menu and you pick 5 subjects every semester. So we have 2 semesters per year, 5 subjects. I'll do that and that and that and that and that one. And then you move on to the next semester and you pick 5 new ones. Now, some constraints, but generally that's what you do. And you do that the whole way through the degree. You can choose to make it really narrow by picking subjects, all similar subjects, or you can make it broad by fleshing it out to do lots of different things. Again, you can choose to do a language or not. French and German, if you're good at them in school, Spanish and Japanese from scratch. Big thing about the BAIB, Bachelor BA in International Business, is third year, you have to spend it abroad. It's compulsory, no ifs, buts, or maybes. 9 months working internationally, which we organise for you, and 3 months studying in a prestigious international university partner. So that means when you graduate from that degree, you have your academic qualification, you have a year's international experience abroad, and you have your 9 months work experience, which makes you eminently employable again. And then there's law and accounting. Law and accounting is slightly different. And this is kind of, again, a kind of CAO learning thing, right? You saw with the other 2 degrees, the BBS and the BAIB, there was good flexibility there. You kind of made choices to define your own journey. With law and accounting, it's pretty much 50% law and 50% accounting from scratch. And you're kind of locked into that. So if you turn around at the end of first year and say, I don't like law, we kind of go, we won't say tough, like, but it's not easy to get out of it. You pick law and accounting. Now, we might transfer you into business studies or something, but the point I'm making is that law and accounting is fairly rigid, fairly structured, difficult for you to pivot one way or another. You should check that in the degrees that you're interested in. Is there a bit of flexibility in first year? Can you define your own path? Are you rammed down a path from day one and you can't deviate from it? And I suppose that requires research. So there are the 3 things. Points-wise, first of all, I didn't get anywhere near any of these points, by the way. I work in a university, that's another lesson in itself. Bachelor of Business Studies around 425, law and accounting about 435, 440, and then BA in International Business is nuts, it's 510. But that could come down or it could go up, I don't know. If you don't achieve those points, you can certainly get in backdoors to the Bachelor of Business Studies by doing a level 7 or a level 8 somewhere and then applying later on as a mature student, or is it a delayed entry, not through the CEO. So that's another thing in your CEO decision that you should be looking into, is if there's something you really want to do and you can't get there in 1 step, consider getting there in 2 or 3 steps by doing X, Y, or Z to get into it. And what you'd have to do to figure that out is find a course online that you're interested in and that you really want to do. And there should be a name or a contact. Start the email conversation with them. Ask the difficult questions. They'll be the ones that'll be able to answer it. But never be shy about contacting somebody on those contacts on the course pages. That's actually their job, to help you figure out how to get on the program. And if you've got a decent course director or a decent course leader, they'll tell you all the back doors to get in. They'll tell you, if you really want to do this, here's what I recommend that you do. I do that a lot with master's students. They come on, they haven't got a great undergraduate degree, and I say, listen, if you can do X, Y, and Z, come back to me next year, or come back to me before the course starts and we'll see what we can do for you. Because we want to see your motivation to do it. Right, so that's kind of UL, and I'm kind of done with UL now, bar maybe the odd reference to it. What I want to talk to you about now is maybe change your minds a little bit in terms of what business involves. So traditionally people think of business as accounting, for example, or they think of business as marketing. Fair enough, absolutely spot on. But If I take one of the options in our business degree, which is risk management and insurance, one of the big things that we're researching at the moment are autonomous vehicles, right? So you say, what has that got to do with business? Driverless cars, what the hell has that got to do with business? Well, business is involved in everything. So with autonomous vehicles, right, I'll deal with the easy one first. There's an insurability problem, right? So you know the parking software on the cars, yeah? Right, so if that fails and a car hops off another car in a car park, who's responsible? Nominally, we'll still have a driver inside in the car, right? Or is it the person who wrote the software for the parking? Or is it the manufacturer of the car? So immediately business has to be thinking, all right, we have to define who owns the risk in order to be able to insure it. And then it'll have to be reinsured subsequently. So we're interested in that. Business is also interested in ethics, governance, compliance, etc. So I'm going to give you a horrible example now, and I'm going to develop it slightly afterwards. But a driverless car is driving down a road, narrow country road, barely enough room for the car to travel down. It's going at an appropriate speed, right? Driverless car, kind of wing mirrors hopping off the briars and the size of the thing, right? From the left-hand edge jumps a child. From the right-hand edge jumps a granny. What's the car going to do? Normally the granny gets it, okay? But the point is, you're now in a car that is making a decision on your behalf. Does the car have a conscience? So now we're in the machine learning space, we're in the artificial intelligence space, and suddenly we as human beings are letting machines make decisions on our behalf. That's a messy area, right? So we need to think about that. In the business school, where I am, is thinking about that. They're also looking at young driver behavior with respect to road use, autonomous vehicles, phone use, all of these things. So we're in a space where business and technology are really, really closely linked. Within that as well, when I applied for my first mortgage, right, or my first big loan, it doesn't have to be a mortgage. You go in, you'd actually talk to someone, yeah? You go in your nice suit or whatever, your good clothes, and you put on your best foot forward or your best foot forward, you'd say, yeah, I'm earning this, etc., etc. When you apply for your first big loan, you're going to do it online. And an algorithm is going to make that decision for the bank in the first instance. Machine learning, you're moving into a space where machine learning, artificial intelligence is going to play a huge role in your lives, even when you don't realize it. And as business people, we need to be aware of that and look at the ethics, the governance, the compliance, the regulation, etc. That's us, along with the lawyers and along with the techie people who are in the room. Other risk management and insurance, right? And this is an example, again, it's about business here. Business reacts to society. We're all society, and business will see opportunities with respect to society. So, pet insurance. 20 years ago in Ireland, there was no pet insurance. Why? Society said that the hierarchy in Irish homes 20 years ago was parents were at the top of the tree, children were next, and pets were at the bottom. What's the hierarchy in Irish homes now? Who's at the top? Pets, children, parents, yeah? Society has evolved that pets are very important in our lives now, and rightly so for lots of reasons, animal welfare in particular. So we now as a society, we expect to be able to look after our animals when they get sick or injured. That's why we pet insurance. So there's a whole pet insurance industry now. And you're all familiar with life insurance, car insurance, health insurance, and house insurance, home insurance. And now we pet insurance. And there's other things, you know, mobile device insurance. All of these industries develop as society develops. And the final thing I'd say about risk management and insurance would be, if I had long enough today, or if I was in a lecture setting, we could talk about how to develop a contract that will protect a farmer against bad weather. So the farmer can't move his cattle or move his crops. But what he can do is sign some sort of contract that will pay him money in the event of bad weather and not pay him money in the event of good weather. Just like you crash your car when you have insurance, you get paid. You don't crash your car, you don't get paid. So we can develop these risk management products to allow people to manage risk in their business. So there in 5 minutes, I've mentioned an awful lot of stuff just in relation to one of the specialisms. The next specialism I mentioned to you is marketing. What do marketing people do? They sell a good or a service. We as a university, we don't advertise now we don't do paper advertising, whether it be magazines or newspapers or anything like that. For the most part, we don't do that anymore. Why do you think that's the case? Because none of you read papers or magazines, I'm guessing, yeah? So we do a lot of our stuff in digital marketing. So obviously, if you do the marketing degree, you learn about digital marketing. But you'd also learn about consumer behavior. Like we have a master's called Marketing, Consumption and Society. Because you consume your music on these. You consume your media on these. Like when I had to share music when I was your age, you know what we had to do? You probably, honest question, do you know what a cassette tape is? Yeah, so when I had to share music, I'd have to sit by a radio which had a cassette player on it and wait for the DJ to play a song, wait for him to stop introducing it, press play and record together, and then wait until the end of the song and try to stop it before he talked over the end of it. And I'd do that until the tape was full. Then I'd write out the names of the songs, yeah? And I'd give it to a friend at school. That's how we shared music. You share it at the click of a button. Now, what has happened with respect to that? Well, everything is in your phone now, so we advertise and we target you through your phone in advertising. And when I talk about marketing, I talk about advertising, marketing, and branding, which is the most interesting one and should be the most interesting one for clever people like you, right? Advertising is really easy. 6 cans of Coke for €2. Side in the shop, bright sign, 6 cans of Coke for €2. Information being transferred to you to go and buy the Coke because it's an offer. Yeah? Do you remember when Coca-Cola put the names on the cans and the bottles? That's a marketing campaign. A bit bigger than the advertising, right? There's more to it. So whoever came up with that's a genius. It cost Coca-Cola practically nothing in terms of changing their labeling process. But guess what? All of the consumers of Coca-Cola all over the world were suddenly brand ambassadors for Coca-Cola. They were taking a picture with a can of Coke beside their face and posting it online. The biggest brand in the world had its consumers actually marketing for them. Now behind that, there was a digital campaign, there was a billboard campaign, radio campaign, television campaign. You could have been involved in all of that if you were working for Coca-Cola in their marketing department around that. That's a bigger kind of thing, a marketing campaign. Then you come up to branding. Anyone brave enough to mention a brand that they like? Don't embarrass me by picking brands like that are 5 years out of date or whatever, but anybody, doesn't matter. Nike, right, okay, so the first thing that comes to mind when Nike, like word association, I'll tell you what the first thing that comes to mind for Nike for me is quality. All right, that's just, I associate it with quality product. Nike would be happy with that, right? I'm going to give you one now. Just tell me a word that you think, right? Pennies. Brilliant. Best answer, pennies cheap, right? Pennies happy with that? What pennies like you to say? Affordable, value. Yeah, exactly. But maybe affordable, value, whatever, that's much better, right? So that's their brand. They have a challenge because pennies is relatively cheap. Any issues around the pennies brand? Ethics, fast fashion. Exactly. So exactly, child labor. So I mean, yeah. So they have to manage that. That's my point. That's exactly the conversation I wanted to start. So pennies have brand managers and brand ambassadors that are trying to portray the image that pennies want portrayed, which is value, fashionable, cheap, whatever, but not that way. Right? So that's an example of pennies, right? What's the most effective marketing technique do you think right now? Influencers, right? You like the influencer likes the product, therefore you like the product. So that scourge of bloody Instagram, like it drives me up the walls, like, because I have a wife at home who comes home every day and she says, look at this, we could have this for our house. And I say, that house is by a lake in America, my house is out in the middle of a farm, like it's not going to suit. But this is the infiltration of brands into people's brains. And this is what I want to say to you. Brands are infiltrating your brains every day of the week. And as 17, 18, 19-year-olds, you should be raging against that machine. And I bet you think you are. But they're winning. And they always win in terms of brands infiltrating minds. And they do. And that's a skill to be aware of that and to actually work in that industry. What's the biggest discipline associated with branding outside of business, do you think? If you think of an academic discipline or a profession. Psychology. So now I've suddenly introduced psychology into business because branding is all about psychology. It's getting you to associate with a particular brand. Because the brand is an extension of you. You driving that particular type of car is an extension of you. Or it could be an effort on your part to make up for some deficiency that you might have. So branding is very, very interesting. And if you came into business studies and you did marketing, you'd be learning all about branding. That's 2 disciplines. Third discipline would be HR, human resources, traditionally associated with hiring and firing people. Anybody have a part-time job here? Yes, I know you have part-time jobs. Maybe pandemic has impacted that. I make up a part-time job that's common when I go out on these school visits, right? So I often ask, have you got a job? And they say, yeah. And then they say, where have you a job? And they say, I have a job in the local deli, yeah? Or the local hotel or the local restaurant. And I'd say, what do you write down in your CV? I work in the local deli. Is that what an employer wants to see when they're looking at your CV into the future? So we do a small bit of a CV clinic, right? So we say, do you work in a team as part of your job in the deli? Yes. Well, now it goes down in your CV, excellent team working skills. Do you communicate with customers? Yes. Excellent communication skills. Do you resolve problems? Yes. Good at handling conflict. If the egg mayonnaise is going out of date, do you sort it yourself or wait for your manager to sort it for you? I sort it myself. Self-initiative, self-starter, leader, problem solver. Do you get what I'm at? Do you remember what I talked about the LinkedIn thing? And LinkedIn being interested in you with your competencies as opposed to your academic qualifications? That's what people are looking for now. Good communication, good teamwork, self-starter, problem solver, good communicator, whatever, all those things. And they're just as important in my job as they will be in many of the jobs that you go on to. And that's what people are interested in anymore. They're interested in you and your competencies. So anyway, HR, hiring, firing, CV consultant, etc. Wellness. Do you do wellness campaigns here? Your mental health. They remind you of the importance. I sure Cara just said it there. You had a talk which was about mental health or wellness. Yeah, so you do, right? Do you know now that within the HR discipline, there's a huge wellness part of it. So if you work for a large multinational now, it's likely you'll have access to a gym, probably on site, and a work psychologist. That doesn't mean you're going loopy at work. It's there's somebody there to talk to about your work environment, your relationship with colleagues, and stuff like that. So there's wellness at work is a huge industry. There's also this idea of knowledge and how knowledge is captured within an organization. And you might think, what's that got to do with HR? Well, that's normally where it resides. I tell a silly story around this one, right? So you come into, you all work for me, right? You come into work every day. You're in a manufacturing environment, nothing wrong with that. And you have to go onto a production line. And as part of your work, you have to wear safety boots, right? Fair enough? So you come into work every day and you have safety boots. And for whatever reason, none of you know how to tie laces. So there's somebody at work who comes along and ties your safety boots before you go onto the production line. Fair enough? Right? So anyway, you finish your shift today, you go home. Tomorrow you walk into work and guess what? The person whose job it was to tie laces has left the organization. But they've left a note inside in your boots telling you how to tie laces. How do you think you get on? Did any of you learn to tie laces out of a book? No. No, forget about the laces now, right? Think about knowledge. How to do things. What's the best way to learn about things? Somebody to show you, practice, even things in tying laces, you know, little rhymes in terms of how to do it or acronyms or whatever. So there's this big thing about knowledge access. How do you access the knowledge you need within an organization? How do you capture it? Like, why didn't they actually show a video of the lace tying rather than just a note? How do you share it? And are you encouraged to share it within an organization? And how do you seek it? What's the normal reason you didn't, why did none of you really want to say a brand that you were interested in? Honestly, it's kind of a little bit of hesitancy or fear. Same in my work, right? If I don't know something at work, do I really want to say to somebody I don't know? And they might go, oh, he's here 20 years and he doesn't know that, he's a fool. So there can be a culture of fear in terms of not knowing something in this environment, in my environment, etc. So what organizations often want to do now is they want to create a culture where they reward you for seeking information, reward you for sharing information, capturing information, and accessing information. It's called tacit knowledge. If you want to know what tacit knowledge is, if you've got 5 minutes spare tonight, write down how to ride a bike. Anybody want to start? The minute you mention balance, you're in trouble, right? Set a fire alarm or day. Okay? Balance. What's balance? Very hard to describe. Anyway, the final two disciplines are accounting and economics. Accounting, you kind of know what it is, right? Doing books of accounts, but that's not all that accountants do. Accountants actually go out into industry and problem solve. So if a company has a cash flow problem, the accountant will be able to identify what the problem is. Might be able to fix it, but will certainly identify the problem and come up with some solutions. For example, it might be a stockroom full of millions euro worth of stock instead of getting it out and selling it, for example. Because if you have a stockroom full of stock, that's cash tied up, right? How to finance expansion, how to negotiate better deals, help with margin. You know, when you go into Dunn's and you spend €1, guess how much Dunn's make, roughly? 1 or 2 cents. Yeah? No, you're a tutor. I'm sure you meant a tutor, right? A tutor will make maybe 60, 80, 100, 200%. Remember, the jeweler's only selling 1 watch a day. The ones are turning over millions every day. So 1 or 2% of millions is a lot of money. So you learn about margins, you learn about average margin, you learn about turnover, all of these things. So they're business skills. And accountants can also get involved in the decision whether to, for example, make any product, whether it be this projector or anything. They work with finance people and they'll be able to say, yeah, it's worth your while making that based on forecast projections. And then finally, you have economists. And I actually think economics is probably the most interesting, broadly interesting part of business. And it really is the intersection of society and the economy. So we're coming out of COVID now. A lot of money being spent by the country in terms of the pandemic payment, a lot of unemployment into the future, certainly in the short term. Hopefully, if you go on to college and 3-4 years time, place will be booming again, you'll be coming into a really good environment, right? But there's this big question now, how do we emerge from it? So I just listening on the radio on the way up, they said it's probably going to be increased taxes, particularly for wealthy people. But that's not going to make up the shortfall because there's not enough tax available from the wealthy people. And then they start suggesting, well, maybe we should tax the people on lower income, that we should widen the tax base. And there'll be a huge debate and everybody, no, can't punish the people on lower incomes, they don't earn enough already, they can't afford a house. The rich people, tax them away, but it's still not going to make up the deficiency, so what do we do? And that's what economics will answer. So for example, the economist will say, well, if you tax the people that don't earn a lot of money, you potentially contribute to the homelessness crisis. You dampen around the economy of Newbridge and everywhere else where people aren't spending money in the local coffee shop because they don't have it, they're not getting their hair done, they're not doing the basic stuff that we do every day. That dampens down the economy, businesses start closing around Newbridge, that increases your unemployment payments, etc. That's one side of it. Whereas somebody else will come along and say, we should increase taxes generally. And you could say, okay, by increasing taxes, that means people are going to have less money to spend, which will result in dampening down again. And other people will say, do you know what we'll do? We'll reduce taxes, and that's just going to pour petrol onto the economy, and everything will rise together. So there are the challenges that the government will face. Now, the economists will feed in all of the information, and ultimately, the government will make a political decision. Like in this room here, right? Safe space, right? You think, for example, when we come out of the pandemic and we go back, so there's going to be large-scale unemployment compared to previously. Do you think we should cut the benefits to people that are unemployed? If you say yes, I'll argue that that will dampen down the local economy because people that are unfortunately unemployed and only receive unemployment assistance, they spend everything they have every week. They don't save. So all that money goes into the local economy. If you say no, I'd say, well, then maybe that's a disincentive for people to try and go out and get a job. But of course, you're then into the situation, well, sorry, there are no bloody jobs because we're just out of the pandemic. So you see, you can have the economic argument and ultimately then the political argument will probably win the day. And then finally, as an economist, you could go to the central bank and you could manage the country's finances. You know, because Ireland has to borrow. Every country borrows to actually do their day-to-day business. And the idea would be that you'd be able to borrow money for Ireland at the lowest rates and manage our debt as a country. Just like you will ultimately manage debt as part of your everyday life. As you progress into adulthood, buy cars, buy houses, etc., you'll have debt in your life that you'll have to repay, and you have to manage that. But we do that in a large scale for Ireland. So look, that's me, and that's business, and that's UL. The final thing I'd say is if you do go on to third level, and remember, third level is not for everybody, okay? There are 3 pieces of advice I give. Maybe 1 or 2 of you might remember this, I don't know. 1, go to your classes. You'd be surprised. In my opinion, at university, you should get to about 90% of your classes. Everybody misses a class or 2, don't get me wrong, but go to your classes. It's the easiest way to engage. Secondly, meet your friends on campus, not in the houses generally. Get on campus. And thirdly, join a club or society. If you do that, you're not in college anymore, you're actually part of the university community. If you don't do that, you're living away from home. You're not part of the university unless you go to your lectures, meet your friends on campus, and join the club or society. Because you actually become part of something very, Jesus, I don't want to get emotional about it, like, but you actually become part of something really, really special when you go to university and engage with it. Because actually you'll develop not only your social network, but your professional network for at least the early stage of your career. Like my best friends now to this day are people that I went to college. So that's kind of the 3 pieces of advice I give. Any questions? So before, it doesn't have to be about UL, it can be about college, it can be about anything. Somewhat related to what we did anyway. I'm smiling for the most part behind this as well. I'm just noticing that like nobody can see my facial expressions, but anyway. Anything at all?
That was perfect.
Yeah?
Great,